Thank you so much. Okay, I wanted to introduce my friends that are here to talk about art teaching. So first, this is Natalie Brown. So Natalie Brown is the KaEA president, and that stands for Kansas Art Education Association. And Natalie works at Derby High School and has 25 years of art teaching experience. And then Theresa Shetler is the KaEA president-elect. They work at Washburn Rural High School in Topeka, and they have 17 years. Katie Morris is also a ESU 2009 grad. So, yay, ESU. So they work at Holton High School, and they have been art teaching for 16 years. LaDonna Voth teaches in elementary at Northridge Elementary, and they've been doing that for 40 years. And Lynn Felts is our retired person on the panel. They worked for 40 years at Winfield High School, and they want to say they're retiring, they're not retiring, they're rewiring. And I know we had some technology issues because we're teachers and we have technology issues. But also, what is a real thing is that we invited a sixth person to our panel whose name is Shannon Weedle, and they could not be here because they could not get a sub. So just a little shout out to Shannon Weedle. So altogether, the panel has 168 years of art teaching experience, and they're here to answer all of your questions. So first, we're going to look at some artwork from each person on the panel. Natalie.
All right, as Dr. Bird said, my name is Natalie Brown. I am similar to a few of the other teachers here in that I am alternatively certified, which means that I actually started off in pre-vet medicine and changed majors to art. That was a real direct connection. By the way, dairy science doesn't give you credit for life drawing or anything like that. Anyhow, so I got a BFA in ceramics. I had looked at education at the time and thought I wanted to do higher ed. I ended up going in to be alternatively certified after I got my MFA in ceramics, so that is my main area. So I work in ceramics, do primarily carved porcelain, and really inspired by a lot of like Korean and Chinese ware, but also by like some of the Art Nouveau style kind of pottery. And then a lot of that is influenced by botanical type of patterns. So I take patterns and things I see in leaves and water and things like that, and that gets translated into different types of extractions I do on my work. And my recent work has had more, instead of the form being more pristine, the form has been altered to also have those impressions. And then there's also some of my 2D work, which I've been starting to do as more kind of like a fun thing. So.
Hi, I'm Theresa Shetler, and I also kind of went a different way for getting my teacher certification. I have a BFA in textiles from Kent State back in Ohio, and an MA in Asian art history, specializing in Japanese art from KU, which is how I ended up in Kansas. Kind of stayed here. And then I got my teacher certificate from Washburn University. So, and my art is very narrative, so it's meant to tell a lot of stories. I've been recently using a lot of quilt patterns, because the quilts to me symbolize different emotions or feelings or stories, and then I have a lot of birds, and I use Japanese fabric in the artworks too, and then I also work with felting, so that's kind of it.
I went to be a teacher the traditional route. I always was interested in teaching. I have something I made in 5th grade that said I wanted to be an artist or a teacher because I didn't know that you could be an art teacher. I didn't have an art teacher until high school, but shortly after that I decided that's what I wanted to do. And I've always thought it's important to keep making art while I'm teaching, and I like to be able to, show students what I'm excited about and what I've been working on instead of just examples for lessons. I have always done a lot of painting, and in the last couple of years I've been doing a lot of murals. My kids are a little bit older now to where I can say, okay, you hang out inside, I'm going to go out to the studio and get some work done. So I've really enjoyed that. And besides murals, I think the big things I've been exploring are portraits, and then also native plants and animals to Kansas. So I've been playing with lots of different ideas, and I like that I can do that and I don't have to just stick with one thing. So I'll probably be on to something different next year. We'll see what piques my curiosity.
Lynn?
Oh, me. Okay. Hey. So I went the traditional route, became an art teacher. I had the art teachers were my greatest influence for my art. In 6th grade, I had an art teacher that saw something in me and put my artwork in a contest. And I was just thrilled. It was at a time when I didn't feel very good about myself. And so that really sparked my interest and kept on creating and moved to many states, many schools. And the art teacher was always the one that provided a safe place for me to be myself. So my greatest influencers were art teachers. What I like to do right now, I'm in my 7th decade, so I get to do what I want. I do in plein air, which means outdoor in light. And that was a self-portrait I made at the top when I had been at Belle Plaine Arboretum, and I'd had such a good day, and I'd done 2. Neither one of them are up there, but I'd had such a great day, and I took a picture and went, oh, I think I'll do that for a self-portrait for a class I was teaching. And then I paint, and so I have painting, I have pastel. Rock Springs is in the bottom right. Oh, you guys, that's Wooster Lake right there. Yeah, because I taught some classes there, and so I thought, well, we'll do one at the lake. And then that tree is a tree that's on Johns Island off South Carolina. It's like a 400 or 500-year-old live tree, oak tree. It's angel oak. So anyway, I just am kind of loving it. You know, every day's a snow day to me.
Hi, I'm LaDonna, and I think you can tell by my slide, I can see my slide, that my media is kind of children, I guess you could say. I live to make up projects and then see what the kids will do with that idea. It's always different. Every time you do a project with a child, they'll come up with their own take on it, and this keeps me going. Actually, I have taught in many different ways. I was a traveling teacher my first years, and I traveled to 12 different schools. I saw children once every 3 weeks. It was when they were just starting to think they might let elementary art happen in the Kansas schools. And now in this last 2 years, I am at one school. I teach every other day. I never have to carry a box. I never have to pack up my computer. And today I teach instead of travel, which is a big thing for me.
So we're going to talk about what is your best advice for first-year teachers?
We have a lot of advice, and actually if you become a KaEA member, we actually had put together like just little snippets of a whole lot of different art teachers, like recommendations that we have for people, and we're always happy to share that with any of our new teachers. But I would say one of the first things that I think about in teaching that is very helpful to me is that you have to teach kind of everything. I think the minute you assume kids know or kids, already have, a procedure down, that's where you will have mistakes. So for example, you have to teach how to clean paintbrushes. You have to teach your expectations on what something should look like at the end of the day. I teach primarily wheel. I'm really fortunate. I'm in a high school. I have 24 electric wheels. So really big program. I have 3 teachers that teach ceramics at Derby High School. It's grown since I've been there. But we spend the first 2 weeks going over the expectations on what the wheels should look like at the end of the hour. You have to constantly show kids where work goes to be stored, things like that. You do have to teach those types of things. We assume that we're teaching like, oh, these are different skills or these are the criteria for a project. But you do have to teach those really basic things as far as like what it should look like or sound like when you're talking and things like that.
I think one of the biggest things that I learned is that you have to set the expectations and then you have to actually follow through on what you said. Like if you ask the class to be quiet so they can hear the instructions, or whatever you need to say, but then you start getting kind of nervous about how much time is left and there are students that are talking and you just decide to ignore them and talk over them, those students have learned that they don't actually have to get quiet and listen. I teach, that was more when I was teaching elementary, I teach high school now, and the biggest thing that I say multiple times a day is we never do nothing in art class, so that's my big expectation that some of them have had to get used to, because I think they thought they were just going to kind of goof off, and it took a little while for some of them to get it, but now it's a fun time of year where most of the students are kind of on board and we're rolling, so that's good.
Okay, so I was 30 years in the high school, and what I did was we would make journals on the very first day, and then I had sustained silent drawing, and so before the bell even went off, as they walked in, I already had things set up and the materials out, and I would just say, go ahead and get your journal and start. So they would start before the bell went off. Everybody would be engaged, and their mind was already in our place. And then we would spend maybe 15 minutes on that. We used different materials, charcoal and ink and paint, whatever. And then we would go on to our main project, but it was kind of like getting into the mindset of, okay, we're doing art.
Okay, so I kind of have a little different spin on advice for first year. So especially your first year, I think you need to find the positive people in your school environment. So the fellow teachers that are positive, that want to be there, that will help support you. Sometimes you can get stuck in with a negative one. You've got to get away from that person to make it worth your while, make teaching fun and enjoyable, and really just love those kids and what they do. And also give yourself some grace. When you're a first year, it's going to be a little hard, but you'll get through it.
I think a key word to remember is flexibility, and that goes in many different ways. Flexibility as an instructor, flexibility with your schedule, teaching your children flexibility. There's nothing worse than a child that says, is this what you want it to look like? Because you want it to be what they want it to look like. So teaching them flexibility is really kind of hard these days when they're used to teaching to the test and taking to the test, that they have their own ideas and their ideas are right. All of their ideas are right. There's no right or wrong.
Oh, okay, so I'm up again. I did 10 years of elementary art in 4 different schools, and then I transferred to the high school, which was in the mid-80s. You weren't born, and maybe nobody in this class, or in this room, hardly anybody was born then. But anyway, discipline-based art education, I started a master's degree at Wichita State University, and the key for this was that I built and made lessons around discipline-based art education, DBAE, which included art history, art criticism, assessment, art aesthetics, which is perception and appreciation of art, as well as studio, because up until then, everything was studio. And I know this sounds really strange to you guys that there wasn't any history or studying or looking at artists, but there really wasn't. So I included that, and my thesis was on positive critiques. And so what we would do is about 2/3 of the way through a project, I'd have the students put their work on the board, and we used Feldman's method of delayed response, where we described what we saw. Then we would analyze it in terms of elements, principles of design, color theory, all that stuff you guys know, if there was a way to interpret it. And then we would delay our response of evaluating it. And we used this with student work, and I wanted them to find something strong about the work, and then if there was something that they needed to improve, because my experience in the 70s was when you had a critique, it was terrible. You were always ripped apart and you were in tears and all that stuff. So I wanted it to be positive and something that we learned to communicate, we collaborated, we did reflective thinking through artist statements and positive critiques, and that became the landscape for my art room. So that's DBAE.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about CTE, which is Career Technical Education. And I am a CTE teacher, but I also teach IB art, which is International Baccalaureate art, and I teach regular art. So at our school, the art classes are not CTE, but they could be. It depends on your district. So the CTE classes that I teach are graphic design, advanced graphic design, and animation, and advanced animation. And with the advanced, you can do multiple levels. So every district will kind of do it a little bit differently. But one of the pros with CTE is that the funding from the state can help for salaries, it can help for equipment. Last year I filled out what's called a Perkins grant, which is through CTE, and I got some, Huion Canvas 13 drawing tablets, which are really nice, but there's kind of only enough to get for half the class, so I use them for the advanced kids, and then I'm hoping maybe next year I can fill out a Perkins grant again and get it for the other half of the class. That's maybe a con, is that sometimes you've got to, maybe it sounds wrong to say, figure out how to use the system to work how to get the supplies how you can. Because sometimes budgets are a little limited, but being CTE can help with that. Also, with CTE, they have a curriculum set out, but it's not extremely descriptive. It's kind of like an outline, which is helpful because then you can change it and do what you want to do in your classroom and what your students want to do. You just have to make sure you hit certain things. That also depends on your school district too, how flexible your district is. My district happens to be really nice and flexible, which is good. So CTE has training that you can get. It's done through the state and through different schools, so that can be very helpful. It's very inexpensive and typically on a weekend, so that's another pro. Another pro can be the advisory board. So with CTE, you have something called an advisory board that matches with your pathway. And there's different pathways, so graphic design and animation are, right now they're in 2 separate pathways, so I'm on 2 different advisory boards, but next year it's gonna be all in one, which will be a little nicer. I'm in too many PLCs and too many things. So, but the advisory is made up of people from the industry. So graphic designers, photographers, we have someone from Jostens on one of the panels, and it can be businesses. We have people from Advisors Excel, which has a graphic design department. And so they help to kind of tell us what's happening in the industry, what are they looking for employers or employees, what kind of new software is out there, and maybe what are the standards. So that can be very helpful. Kind of a con with the advisory board is trying to find people to be on your board, because the state mandates that you have to have a board of people to be on your CTE pathway. I think I lose people every single year because they either change jobs or they don't have enough time for it, and it's really difficult in your teaching day of 8 hours where you're teaching most of the day and you've got a maybe 45-minute plan to try and reach out and find a graphic designer or an animator or a photographer. So that's one of the cons to that. Also, a little bit is trying to fit it into your schedule. You have to have advisory meetings twice a year. That can be a little bit difficult to do, but then they can also be kind of fun. So sometimes I've gotten to go and see different workplaces and look at how it's set up and what they use. So that can be good too. Trying to see if I didn't miss anything. Oh, paperwork. And I know Katie's done CTE also. My school is kind of pretty good because we have a sort of CTE director, and so they will help with the paperwork for us. There is a lot that the state asks you to do and fill out in different ways you have to handle things and cite stuff. Thankfully, we have someone that helps us with that, but we do spend a lot of our PLC time trying to get it all together and trying to get the correct wording. But I think overall it works itself out. I think that's it.
We have a person that you mentioned earlier, Shannon Wagner actually is on the card and teaching. She should have been here today, but she could not get a substitute, which is something we all face quite a bit anymore. So I'm looking back into my background and going back to what it was like to roll on a cart. And it sounds very, very scary at first that you think, I've got to have a classroom, I've got to have my home base, but a cart can really be actually a lot of fun. The first thing you want to do if you're on a cart is assess the situation. Go into your building, look around, see where they're going to put you, because you will have to have some place where your supplies and your cart are stored. So you want to kind of get the lay of the land first and find out where things are. And then check your classrooms, because if you're rolling on a cart, one classroom may have small tables, the other one might have individual desks. So you have to kind of lay out that too. So you've got to be flexible again, whether you're at a single table or desks. Media access, and that would be something I never had to deal with, but today I would think you'll always want to have access to like a YouTube demonstration, or even just music. I play a lot of music with my kids. And so you want to be sure that when you walk into your classroom and you're traveling from classroom to classroom, you have the way to plug in your laptop. Do you need speakers? Those are all kinds of things you have to take into consideration on a cart today. You want your cart to be able to move with ease. You've got to be able to go in and out of the hallways and down the aisles in your classroom. Sometimes teachers have multiple carts. I know when I traveled, I had multiple carts at different sides of the building or different floors in a building, because if you have different floors. And another thing I'm just thinking off the top of my head is don't ever think it might not happen to you because you have an art room. Because if your district grows, your art room is the first one to go, and you'll be on a cart until they do some other kinds of changes in the building. You want to make sure that your cart is functional, but you can do lots of really fun things with them anymore. There's all kinds of magnetic things that can hook on, and you can hook on different display boards. I was looking at some things that people were doing during COVID, when many of us were on a cart again, whether we wanted to be or not, or whether we had a classroom or not. They had us on carts going into the classrooms. There are a lot of great ideas that people are doing, all kinds of things with lights and sounds. And when you walk into a classroom on a cart, you are a special person. And it's something that, it's like you can feel this, she's here kind of attitude about you when you walk in. And that's something that I miss actually when I started looking back at all of these things, because now the teacher brings the children to me. They line up in the hallway. I have them come into the classroom. They go to their seats. And it's just very structured, and then I've got 50 minutes, I'm out the door. And when I still rolling with my cart, I could hear the classroom teachers preparing the kids for me. They'd say, she's here. She's out in the hallway. And they'd go, oh, she's here. And I'd walk in the room, and it was like, yay! And then applaud or whatever. It was just like, I felt like I was Santa Claus some of the time when I walked into these places. Okay, back to realistic things here. You've got to make friends with the classroom teachers. You're going in and out of their space. You want to be friends with the custodian and the specials teams, because those are your support groups, especially when you're on a cart. Leave the classroom as you found it. You never want to leave a big mess in a classroom. Your teacher will not like you if you do that. Your classroom teacher will not. And still, you can build student relationships even if you're on a cart. That's an important thing. That's probably the most important thing, is to build those relationships. Another thing to look into is when you walk into the room, of course, they're going to cheer and be all excited, but you want to make a transition kind of time. Maybe it's a song that you sing when you come in, or maybe it's a cleanup song when you leave. Handle those transitions in your own special way. Collaborate, and this is a great way to get into teaching STEAM with classroom teachers. When you're on a cart, you can collaborate with them. And my classroom teachers had the choice when I traveled. It was not planning time. And so they could choose to stay with me, or they could do their own work in their classroom. And those teachers that made the choice to stay with me, we did a lot of collaborating and integrating our subjects together. The artwork that I made, they would write about, or they'd be working on a special unit and I'd do something to collaborate with that, which is basically a lot of what they're calling STEAM today. Supplies you want to be planning. One way of planning is to organize across media, across the grade levels, so that if you're doing painting with kindergarten, you do that with first and second, third, fourth. So your supplies are staying the same. Oftentimes students will have their own supplies. They'll have their crayons and things like that in their desks that they'll have access to. Things like art caddies that you have organized and set out onto their desks of their groups, things like that. Buckets, not sinks. And this may sound surprising to you, but even if there was a sink in a classroom, I would take buckets because they would put their dirty brushes in the bucket and I'd get out the door. It takes a lot of time. If you've ever seen a kid dump paint water, they stand there and watch the paint water go round and round. And you don't have time for that when you're on a cart. You've got to be in and out. Choose less mess. That is the sad thing about the cart is you can't probably paint every time. And when you do something like painting or printing or clay, it's going to be exciting. But you do have to kind of choose less mess. Do things that prepare ahead of time, like sharpen your pencils, have a place for dead supplies, have paper towels on your cart, wipes, cleaning supplies in case that accident happens, and label everything, even your paper towels, because you'll forget something and you'll never see it again. And stay positive. Not everything will go according to plan, but just reflect on it and grow with it.
All right, so I'm going to get into advocacy, and I think that this is a really important topic, especially with a lot of the things that are going on in our political climate right now. I would say one of the first things with advocacy is you need to stay informed. And I know that this group is art teachers, but I also know that you are artists too, but you need to stay informed. I will tell you a really weird experience I had when my early years when I was teaching at Derby. I was already tenured. I've been there for 5 years. I had the principal sit down with me and said, "So you guys are certified K through 12, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Where's this conversation going?" She's, "Well, have you been checking the board agendas?" What do you mean? No, not really. Why do I care what the Board of Education is talking about? And she said, "Well, you might want to check the next board agenda." And we looked at it, and they were looking at cutting our elementary art teachers. Well, the thing is our teachers at the time had been with us for a very long time. So that cut meant, when you look at what's called a reduction in force, it was my job. And the principal was trying in a sideways way of letting me know that that was a risk. And so besides the fact that I valued my job, I also value having a K through 12 program. I was like Katie, I lived Northeast Kansas, and we didn't have elementary art. So we were excited when we had any art experiences. And so for those of you that had a K through 12 program, that you learned about the arts early on, everything builds. So it's really important, but you have to stay informed of things that are going on. So that's at your district level, that's at the state level, that's at the national level. And actually, I was checking my email earlier today. Coming from the National Art Education Association, they are asking people to go and get on and talk to our House representatives because they are looking at the funding year 25 budget and they want to slash Title I funding by 25%, including eliminating the only program that they have that supports the arts because they say that the focus should be on the core subjects, reading, writing, and math. So that's for everybody. If you valued your art education, I'm just saying, stay informed. Make sure that you're sharing your opinions on those things because, if I hadn't taken art in high school, I don't know if I would have taken art in college. I don't think I'd be on the same career path that I am now. Promote your program. Things like posters. It's Youth Art Month right now, so this is one of the reasons we're really excited to be here. But Youth Art Month, we try and promote. I go to board meetings, make sure my school board constantly knows the things that we're doing. They're really cool. You can do things like newsletters, Artsonia. I know several of our teachers use Artsonia, which is a great way to promote your program to families as well as the district. Use data. Districts are really concerned with data. We did a survey a few years ago. It was one of the first things I did with the board, which was sending out a survey on the condition of the arts, and I was asking, how much do different districts get for budgets? So when they're telling you, you can buy all the art supplies you need for $300, I was like, what do you mean for elementary art? We have 1,000 students and you're giving us $300? That's 30 cents a pupil. That was what our elementary teachers were getting the first year I was there. And so we were going and saying, not just going, this is how much art supplies cost, but I was going, well, this is how much Wichita gets. This is how much Hayesville gets. And so that survey is open to anyone to access, and we repeated it about 2 years ago. So it's data for you. So it's not just your opinion that this doesn't work. It's going, look, if your district's competitive at all, you can go and look and say, this is comparative data. There's a lot of resources on the National Higher Education website that you can use. We just are doing a book study right now called Your Brain on Art, which is talking about on the biological level how it changes your endorphins and things like that. Producing art is good for you and good for your health and for the brain. And then the other thing that I'd say to help advocate for your program is do those things that make it stand out a little bit. It's not that you have to do everything, that if you're the art teacher and you have created a National Art Honor Society, that can be something that really draws attention to your program. I served on our school improvement committee, and yes, I hated the meetings, I'll be honest, they were not my favorite meetings. But it meant that I had a say on things that the school was looking at on how we were considering data and the electives in the school improvement plan, because before that they only cared about what the math and English teachers said. Apply for grants, things like that. So do things to advocate for your program and stay informed.
I wanted to add one thing to advocacy. I think it was 2 years ago now, the Kansas State Board of Education was considering cutting the fine arts credit requirement. So right now there is one fine arts credit for high school graduation in Kansas. You know, it could be music, band, theater, art, anything like that. And we found out that the committee was considering cutting that to a half credit. So we kind of mobilized the art teachers and got really organized, and Elizabeth Madden, who was the KaEA president at the time, and myself, we went to Topeka and we presented to the committee when they were just discussing it to make their recommendation, and we shared a lot of that advocacy information, and we shared how, you know, having art programs make kids less likely to drop out of high school, and how it is good for your brain and good for you as a person, and how it's good career preparation, because it's not just about you know, teaching kids to grow up and be artists. It's the thinking and problem solving, you know, that goes into that. Later we presented to the State Board of Education, and we weren't really sure how that vote was going to go, but they actually did vote to keep that one fine arts credit. But luckily we heard about that. I mean, I don't think it's 100% us. I know other organizations were involved in advocating to keep that as well, but it was a really good thing that we were informed about that, so that way we could let people know why that was a bad idea. All right. Okay, I wanted to talk just a little bit about tab choice. It is a teaching philosophy that's been around for, I'm trying to remember if it was the late 60s or the 70s when it started, but I think it's becoming more well known now. The big ideas, the guiding principles of TAB, teaching for artistic behavior, are what do artists do, the child is the artist, and the classroom is the child's studio. So the opposite, like the extreme end of that, would be the teacher making all of the decisions and the kids feeling like they just have to follow the directions, you know, step by step, and make this thing that looks exactly like the example. And I don't think that most art teachers do that. Some people hear choice and they might call it like free choice, and I don't really like that term because it makes it sound like a free-for-all, and that there's, you know, students aren't being held accountable and they're not actually learning anything. So there is a structure to TAB, and there's also not just one way to do it. So at the elementary level, it will often start with like a 5-minute mini lesson where the teacher's demonstrating something new, or maybe they're discussing artwork. It can be a lot of different things. And then after that, the students, you know, might be working in centers. They might be working with a theme. They might be doing a lot of different things. But the things that tie it all together are trying to give the kids choices so they feel ownership over their art. They feel like they're allowed to be creative and make decisions. And, you know, some people think, well, kids don't make good decisions. Well, you have to practice learning how to make good decisions. If you never get the chance to try that, you're not going to get better at it. So I have some examples of what it could look like, things that I have used. When I was first starting, I did choose your own adventure. So we were, I used to teach in the same district as Theresa, and we always had Cultural Heritage Week at the high school. So K-12, all the art teachers tried to do something with that culture. So one year we were doing African art. So I showed, and Africa, the continent, not the country like some people think. So I found a bunch of different things that students could do, and I introduced them, and they got to choose their own adventure within that like broad theme. So I've also done that, like, okay, we're gonna learn about weaving, so here's 3 different ways you could do that. It could be where students have the choice of the medium or the theme, and I do that a lot, especially after my intro class. I tell students, if I'm choosing the theme, then you get to choose the medium, the supplies that you want to use. Or if I'm going to choose the medium or a new technique I want them to try, then I'll let them choose the theme for their artwork. I like to present things as challenges, just because sometimes students think that's a little bit more fun. And that way, when you do have certain things that you are required to teach, you can still figure out how much choice can you put in there. And sometimes it could be full choice where you're asking the students, well, what do you want to make? My advanced class students can basically do that. If they are motivated and they have ideas, then I don't have a set curriculum that I have to follow, so that's what we're able to do. I did realize last year some of them wanted a little bit more direction, but just were afraid to ask, which I think is funny because I'm not very intimidating. But once I realized that this year, I told them from the beginning, okay, you can choose for this class. Do you want it to be more independent study, like the description says? Do you want me to give you specific challenges, or do you want somewhere in the middle? So I'm able to individualize that and make it work for each student. So choice does not mean free for all. It doesn't necessarily mean full choice all the time, because there's required things we have to cover, and it doesn't mean every class is the same. I have 4 sections right now of Principles of Illustration, which is a CTE class, kind of equivalent to Art 1 at my school. And most of the time, we're kind of doing the same topics, but I've definitely had it before where like one section needs a bit more direction or needs things broken down, so you can adjust it, for each class, for each student. And then I already talked about some of this, but just some more visuals, because you're going to be able to get this slides presentation if you want to access the link. But yeah, it's a continuum or a spectrum. Not everything is the same all the time. And I really like that I'm able to make it fit the students' needs. They still get choice. It's learner directed when we can, but we can move back and forth to cover everything we need to and make it work for everybody.
Okay, the next topic we had was just students with special needs, and the question is, how do we accommodate all students? I will say I think probably one of the biggest things is I'm a real big proponent of the idea that what you do with students should be fair, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be equal, okay? So you may have some kids that your expectation of them for, say, fine motor skills is going to be different if they have cerebral palsy than from a kid that might have normal eye motor control, okay? And so there's things like that, and it's okay to change those things, and it's okay to modify things for students. I think that's a big thing that we sometimes have to give ourselves permission to do, because we go, oh, well, we have this standard, everybody has to meet exactly that, but everyone is growing at different rates and has different abilities.
As a choice-based teacher, sometimes I don't have to do a lot of modification, because a lot of my special education students, if we have a theme, well, they're still making something within that theme, but I always try to compare students to themselves, not like the best in the class. And so I think if you let them know that it's okay, we're not comparing you, everybody's just trying to do their best, then that takes care of a lot of the problems. And then sometimes with special education students, you have to educate the paras as well on what you're expecting. So today I left at lunchtime to get ready to come here, and I had set out supplies for one of my students with some higher needs. But I made sure to tell the parent, like, it's okay if it doesn't look like the other people's projects, if you just, my other students were doing like pixel art, so I had squares cut for him, and he probably just had fun picking the colors he liked and gluing them down how he wanted. You know, it's okay, it doesn't have to look like what adults think it maybe should.
So we always had students that were placed in our classrooms. I didn't really ever have any teacher aides, so it was just me and everybody. And the takeaway I had was, what was good about it was good for people to see other people and for us to accept the diversity of somebody else with special needs. So that's my take.
So since I teach graphic design and animation, and we work on using Adobe programs and Macs, and I have a lot of special needs students in my classes too, I have to be able to differentiate for like all different levels, super high to ones that need more help. So I do a lot of videos. I use Screencastify or whatever, I forget what it's called, but I don't know. So I make videos so I can have those on my Canvas or Google Classroom. I have printed handouts with like pictures and step by step, and then I'll have students that can go beyond that too and sort of create their own thing. So just being able to have a lot of different choices for how the student might learn. Sometimes maybe even just having another task for them to do, because with animation especially, it can get really frustrating. If you hit the wrong button, it's not gonna work. So sometimes it might be like, oh hey, just take this folder to the teacher down the hall. So you might have something set up to give them a break, whereas you know you're giving them a break and it's not really a task they have to do, but they don't know that. And it gives them time to like stop, pause, reflect, and maybe calm down. Sometimes you might even get a student who the goal is just that they come in the room and get their supplies. And then that's great if they can do that, and then they learn the routine. So it's just really being flexible, which I think we've all said a lot, and just being able to differentiate.
I have students in my classroom that have special needs that are things like learning disabled, that type of special need. And the accommodations you've been talking about are great for that, but then I also have classrooms that are completely behavior disorder or completely IDD, which is Down syndrome, autism, things like that. You've got to know the kids to adapt to what the kids need when you have situations like that. For example, my BD classroom, my classroom teacher liked to do themes, and so I would plug into the themes. And oftentimes after we would do something on a theme of, say, apples, and the children would write about the apples, so we'd integrate writing into the art with them. My IDD kids that I have right now, you know, when I first heard I was going to have to do a special needs classroom, a self-contained special needs classroom, I'll admit I was kind of afraid. I didn't know if I was going to be able to handle them or not. But they do come when they're coming in a group like that. They come with a lot of support. And the people who work with those special children have a lot of training on how to work with those children as well. They have turned into like one of my very favorite classes to be with. When they come in, we have our routine where they come in and sit on the rug, and depending on what we're going to do a project on, like we're doing some leprechauns right now. I have leprechaun songs that they listen to and get them comfortable in the classroom first. And their attention spans aren't very long. I have to have them for 30 to 35 minutes. So we do some songs. And a lot of what we do with the kids in this class is kinesthetic. We do a lot of painting, big sheets of paper, and gluing things down that they can just really move their hands with. And then those papers will cut into different shapes, like leprechaun shapes and things like that. They get a lot of satisfaction from walking out of there carrying something. They like to go by the secretaries and show them what they made when they walk by, kind of thing. And they're so rewarding. And every time I turn on the cleanup song, they all sing along in their funny little voices. It's just, don't be afraid. They're the most rewarding kids you can work with.
Okay, so continuing making art. But I just wanted to piggyback on what she said about learners, because it was in what I wrote, and I'm just going to tell you that people learn in different ways. You have verbal learners who like listening to like what we're doing right now, or they might like a handout or see it written on the board. You have visual learners that like to see all the examples and the materials and the subject matter, and then you have hands-on people that just want to get on into it. So you need to allow for a lot of different kinds of learning styles. So going on to creating your own work, when I first started teaching, I was a brand new elementary art teacher and a brand new mother, so I didn't have a lot of time to do my art, but I decided I was going to. So the takeaway is that when you leave school and you're into whatever you're into, you should continue to do what it is that really motivates you, that's your passion. For me, just going back for a minute to the Master of Art Education, that helped me to intensify my commitment to be the best art teacher I could be. Because talking about works of art, I've always said my best works of art were my students. So my master's process was really important to me. And in this picture, you can see that this was at Rock Springs with Kansas Art Education Association on the left. I actually had 27 in the class, but some of them were gone home, or a site coordinator. I even had a nursing mom, so they all weren't up there. But you can go from lots of people to just a couple friends coming over and creating art. And as I said earlier, I've kind of morphed into doing a lot with pastels and painting, but you just had to follow your passion. And then one thing I want to make sure that I get to say is that one of my favorite quotes is from Pablo Picasso, which is that art washes from the soul, washes the dust from your soul of everyday life. So art is very important.
All right, and I will just add on to that with Lynn. One of the things I found, and I've had some discussions with my people in my big state, that with me having my degree, I always think of like having to do really finished work at times. So I'm doing stuff for a show, and I found that for me, one of the most therapeutic things is just doing, in some ways we might even think of it as throwaway art, but like I'll do artist trading cards or things like that. They're just a way of pausing to create, but I'm not worried about being this finished thing. Does that make sense? And so I think giving yourself that permission that it doesn't have to be this big artwork, it doesn't have to be something I'm going to exhibit or even give or show to anyone else, but just those little things I think are good. And that I think kind of goes into the self-care of creating. This is really, I think, some kind of first year advice too. But first of all, it's okay to say no. As an art teacher, you're going to be asked to help do the decorations for prom. You're going to be asked if you can sponsor a club or do different things like that, especially your first few years. It's certainly okay to say, no, I'm not up to that. It's too much. I'm just handling getting everything right for my classes. Prioritize needs like sleep, having a chance to create, eating meals. My daughter is in her 5th year teaching, and I'm still going, you can't just survive on your lunches every day by grabbing the granola bar or whatever was stuck in your desk. You've got to actually plan to keep your energy up. If you're not well fed, that's that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have sleep, if you don't have food, things like that, you will not be successful. So make sure you take care of those. And it's okay to not grade and go to bed early. It really is when you're not feeling well. Work smarter, not harder. I think for a lot of art teachers, we have to create everything that we do. Like we're like, oh, we found this project, we have to make it ours, we have to do it. It is fine to use teachers pay teachers. It is fine to find something canned online or to use it out of your textbook. That's okay. That doesn't mean you're a bad teacher. If you found something that does what you're wanting to teach, use it. Ask for stuff from friends. Ask for help. As KaEA, we all think of ourselves as mentors, and we are always here. Like, we have people that may be nearby. They're like, hey, I'm having issues with the kiln, and that's one thing that I do a lot working with ceramics, and they'll just be like, hey, what should I do? This is happening here, and like reach out to people for help. Don't feel like you're in a vacuum. As an art teacher, you might be the only teacher in your building or in your district, so find a support network. And then it's okay to take a break. Like I said, don't feel guilty about it. It's so easy to go, okay, which should I do? Prioritize my job or take time for me? And you have to set time aside for yourself.
Okay, so I have a couple things to talk about for community and kind of how to find your people. Some of it piggybacks onto what Natalie and we've all been saying, especially when Natalie talked about staying informed. So I think when I first started as a teacher, I probably said yes to way too many things. It took me a little while to say no, and it also took me a little while to figure out how to get informed and how to connect with my community. So probably around 2019, so I've been teaching for a while, kind of get a little tired of, what is the salary, what's the raise going to be, and kind of not getting a whole lot. And I thought, well, I'm not going to just complain about this because that's not doing anything. So I was a member of my school's teachers union, and I still am, and I decided to become a negotiator. So I thought, well, I'm going to change this. I'm going to work to make it better and make it better when you're laughing at me, and make it better for all the teachers in my teachers union. And my first year as a negotiator with a team of, I think we had 5 other people that year, we actually got a raise of $3,000 because I was able to use my teacher skills and point out in the negotiations with the board where our school ranked and how our pay compared to other schools. I also worked in business before becoming a teacher, so I think all those like salesman skills and that kind of stuff came out for the negotiating process. I like to research, which is weird, but so I would do a lot of research so I could say, well, this school compared to this school, this is where we rank, because my school always liked to be like, we're the best, and I was able to point out, no, we're not. So joining your teachers union, helping out, maybe be a building rep with your teachers union. It's a good way to get to meet people and to help people too, if you're kind of in that social activist kind of vibe. If that's not your thing, don't do that. You can always help in many other ways. So there's also safety in numbers. So even becoming a member of like KaEA, Kansas Art Education Association, that's my people. It's positive, it's friendly, it's helpful. If I have a question about ceramics, which I don't do ceramics, but if I did, I could be like, hey Natalie, how do I do this? And she would help me out. My daughter is thinking of becoming an elementary art teacher, and so I can talk to all my friends here and say, where should she go, or what can she do? How is the future looking for her? And with KaEA, we have amazing conferences and conventions. We have PD available. We have our website, and so much that can be contributed by all of us. So it's very helpful. Also, even just finding your community in your school. Like this week, my teacher besties, which are CTE teachers and the foods teacher and the art teacher, we all got together for lunch and celebrated a friend's birthday. So remembering those little small moments and celebrating, finding time to find the joy in life. So that's my spiel for community. And also, I think I can say this, so there is a rally at the Capitol in Topeka on Monday, March 17th from 12 to 1 to fight for public education. So if you want to ask more on that, I can answer more later.
Here is everyone's email address, so you can reach out to them. I will stick them.
If there are any questions, feel free to ask. I can hand out the mic as well so that everybody can hear each other. There are no questions?
How many of you are art ed majors?
Yeah, so be sure to check that out if you do have any. We're glad to share.
And follow, if you are getting ready to graduate, follow the KaEA webpage. We've been posting with openings. I'm sure Dr. Bird's been telling you that, but definitely check in for openings. There's always a lot. So.
Okay, great. Well,
To support the ESU Art Forum program, please visit emporia.edu/art. Click on the Events tab, scroll down to the Art Forum link and click. Then scroll down to the Support Art Forum button and click. Finally, choose your donation level and click on the Continue button to complete the process. We appreciate your support.